While stigmatized on movies and TV, dissociative identity disorder, formerly known as multiple personality disorder, is extremely complex and not as scary as people think. To inform, I want to give people a better understanding of dissociative identity disorder and hopefully bust some of the myths that people seem to believe. The average number of alternate personalities a person with DID has is between 8 and 13, but there have been cases reported of more than 100 personalities within one individual. Most people who hear the words dissociative identity disorder more recently seem to think only of the inaccurate movie depictions such as Split, and that leaves people with fear and bad feelings towards individuals who are just humans with mental health issues who need support and help. Today we will be exploring dissociative identity disorder. First, we will go over why DID surfaces. Next, what alters are and their purpose. Finally, we will talk about how people manage their day-to-day lives with it. This disorder is fairly complex, but I will cover as much as possible to educate you to the best of my ability. Dissociative identity disorder, or DID, surfaces due to extreme trauma during childhood before the brain has had an opportunity to fully develop into one singular complex personality, or what you would consider normal. Examples of extreme trauma would include repeated childhood emotional, sexual, physical, or any other kind of abuse. According to Paulette M. Gillig, a professor with a PhD in psychiatry, if you were to look at a history of DID patients, you would see that they show dissociative symptoms by ages 5 to 10, and around the age of 6, the appearance of an alter. At this time, and generally up until adulthood or until diagnosed, a person with DID will lose time and unexplainably, which is called dissociative amnesia. They do not know why or how, but they can be aware of chunks of their lives being lost while another alter is out. This can be anywhere from a few hours to years. An alter is just an easy way of saying an alternative state of consciousness or identity. The state of consciousness is like an iceberg. The tip is what is seen above water or outside the body, but the subconscious is the gigantic part under the surface that you can't see. For example, to be conscious is what you see, hear, touch, the physical world. The subconscious is just the parts of your brain that you really aren't in control of and generally don't have access to, and you can't even remember. When a person with DID fully steps back from consciousness, they no longer control the body that they are in, and they aren't experiencing anything that is happening on the outside world, or rather in their inner world. An alter is now in the driver's seat, or what is called fronting, which is when they have control of the body's functions and movements. This is not always voluntary, especially if they are unaware of the alter in the body or that they have dissociative identity disorder. And that is when they dissociate, which is a confused, disoriented, out-of-body experience, sort of pulling away from the light of consciousness. This can happen with a trigger, and alters all have roles and reasons for being brought into existence. As explained beautifully by Julie P. Gentile, a doctor with a master's in clinical neuroscience, when someone experiences something traumatic, their brain's way of trying to survive, handle, escape, or adapt to the situation is to dissociate. Then proceed to create amnesic barriers with alters who have specific roles in protecting the person from the memories. DID is not a split of one person's identity into sections. It is the brain's way of protecting the person and attempting to cope by creating entirely separate beings or personalities in the brain with their own set of functions, characteristics, age, name, feelings, and look in the inner world. These separate beings are what make up a system, which is an accumulation of alters occupying one body. The inner world is a place for the alters to reside in their separate states in the brain, but they do not always coexist or have the ability to communicate. Each system's inner world is completely different and can depend on preference. For example, some systems have them living in mansions, houses, a castle. They have gardens, they have forests, they have oceans. It all depends on how many alters they have and what they can agree on. Alters can usually change the aspects of their inner world to fit what they want. Like if they want a garden, they'll plant a garden. They can hear, touch, eat, sleep. Anything that we can do on the outside world, they can do in their head, and it all seems very real. According to Simona Trifu from the Journal of Educational Sciences and Psychology, the alters perform certain functions, such as being internal persecutors, hosts, protectors, and other identities for special purposes. Protectors come to the surface to protect the body from harm, care for, and help the other alters do what is best for everyone. It can be good or bad. For example, if a protector were to be overly protective of the body, they might push away people that they deem as dangerous, such as family or friends. Or they can comfort or forcibly come to the light to experience something bad in place of a host or alter who cannot handle it. They are still human and they make mistakes. Persecutors have dealt with trauma and taken a lot of abuse and may take a role in harming their body, or even another alter, in order to punish or stop the healing process because they are stuck in their time of abuse. Hosts are the alters who are out the most, and they do daily tasks and take care of regular mundane things. There are many different kinds of alters and so many more details on alters. Alters are contextual to the person and trauma they have survived and are there to hide the trauma from the original person or core, known as the first person to be born into the body before the brain kicked up the amnesic borders of DID. For instance, if a child were suffering from sexual abuse and couldn't handle the pain or sexual aspect, a sexual alter could be created to not only be the memory holder of that traumatic event, but also not to feel the pain that the child is feeling. If one alter is out and others are not, they do not share the same experience or memories. They cannot access each other's memories, which makes it easier for the hosts or cores to stay oblivious to the trauma, but harder when trying to live a life, although there are methods of alters helping each other out. Trying to manage day-to-day activities with DID can leave a system in a constant state of chaos, especially when it is difficult for alters to communicate in their inner world. Some systems may only be able to communicate with each other if they're co-conscious, a state which two alters front at the same time. For instance, a task as simple as driving to work can become tedious if another alter begins to front. When coming into consciousness, the alter will be suffering from dissociative amnesia and will likely return home because they don't know what was happening before they were fronting. There are a few ways for a system to communicate outside the body. Many systems will leave notes on their phones to remind the others should they begin to front in the middle of a task. In one situation, a woman with DID named Evander Faye explains how she stays organized with her alters by having a private chat room just for her system on their phone where they have all the names and colors assigned to each person, and they tell each other of appointments, schedule changes, important dates, and just everything they need to know about the day while they're out. In conclusion, while stigmatized on movies and TV, dissociative identity disorder, formerly known as multiple personality disorder, is extremely complex and not as scary as people think. People who have dissociative identity disorder are not monsters. They are just the results of the real monsters in this world. Thank you.